Welcome back to Project Breakthroughs. I'm David Dubay. In this episode, I want to talk to you about pleasure. Enjoying more about life, more through life, more with life. How to do that. And that is from understanding pleasure. So many of us, we experience pleasure on a daily basis. But not only do we experience pleasure, we experience the opposite of pleasure, right? We experience anger, remorse, hate, sadness. And then we experience happiness, joy, love, delight, glee, playfulness, and pleasure. And there's all forms of pleasure, right? There's the sexual pleasure, and then there's the pleasure that comes from happiness or from being in the presence of those that you love and appreciate. Pleasure comes in all forms and varieties, but there's something wrong with pleasure these days. And that's what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about what's wrong with pleasure. And in understanding what's wrong with pleasure, you'll understand what real pleasure is. And when you understand what real pleasure is, and there's another word, understand, right? Understand. It's a knowingness that's within you. When you have that, and you have this understanding of what pleasure really is, you can actually achieve greater levels of pleasure. But most people, they don't understand pleasure. They don't get pleasure. I say this, and I say this all the time. People get things, but they seldom understand them. A good example of this is how many systems make up the human body? How many? You know, I've heard answers of like 6, 7 to thousands. The simple answer, and if you go to Google and look at it, they're going to say 12. Now, we have the endocrine, muscle, skeletal, digestive, reproductive, right? Those are just a few of them. But the idea is you have a body, you use your body every single day, and yet you fundamentally don't understand how your body works, and yet you can still live and exist. The same is true with pleasure. You have pleasure every day, you experience pleasure every day, but fundamentally, you don't understand pleasure. And the reason why you don't achieve greater levels of pleasure is because of your lack of understanding of pleasure or understanding of pleasure. So let's talk about pleasure. There's two forms of it. There's what we call negative pleasure and positive pleasure. Negative pleasure is where the problem lies. Now, we can't escape negative pleasure. It's going to be around forever, and it has been around forever. But our capability of negative pleasure taking over our lives has gone through the roof. And there's so many different reasons why this is the case, but as soon as I talk about what these things are, what negative pleasure is, bells should be going off in your head. Negative pleasure is things like pornography. It's things like video games, binge eating, binge drinking, any addictive behavior. Anything that takes you away from the present moment for long periods of time for the dopamine hit, right? It's that dopamine hit that we're going after. It's that dopamine hit that we want. It's the social media hour drain where you go on to do one thing and 50 minutes later you're like, wait, that was 15 minutes? Sometimes it's like 2 hours later, like that was 2 hours? You go log online to play video games and you're on for 5 hours. You only meant to be on for like 1 or 2 games, and now you've played 15. And what it's doing to you is it's destroying your pleasure. It's ruining your ability to achieve greater levels of pleasure in meaningful things. So what is positive pleasure? Positive pleasure are things that take time, that give you pleasure. Like going to the gym. It might hurt. It might not feel good right away, but over the course of time, you feel way better. You rebound quicker from the exercise. You look better. You feel better. Your health and vitality go through the roof. Your ability to fight off disease and and illness goes through the roof. But when you don't exercise, when you don't prioritize those things, guess what happens? Over the long term, you yourself have plateaued. And what really happens is no one plateaus. We start going backwards. Our body starts to deteriorate. And when you're not exercising, now I'm not saying you should exercise every day. I'm not saying you should exercise, 10 times a week, 2, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. And the benefits of that over the long term are so great that I can't even share what those benefits truly are, because to you individually, they're going to be different for you over someone else. Your health conditions and the condition of you personally is going to be different than someone else. But the idea is, over the course of long term, the benefits outweigh, right, the downside of going to the gym. Going to the gym is just one thing where there's positive rewards, a long-term relationship, a marriage, right, dedication to someone. Over long term, there's more rewards in that. But most people, we want the instant gratification. So we're not going to put in the effort. We just want the result. This is why hookup culture is so prevalent, is because we just want the result. If I can just get the result, then I don't have to put up with the relationship. But the reward is in the relationship. It's not in the hookup. It never is in the hookup. In the beginning, it seems that way, but over the course of time, it's not even close to that way. That is the problem. Like, the dopamine hit that you're getting instantaneously from playing the video game, from going on the social medias, from binge watching your show, whatever it is that you are getting the dopamine hit, right? The negative pleasure from, you're taking away from the impact of positive pleasure or the rewards of positive pleasure. Because you're putting in time that gives you no rewards. Okay? Tell me what social media gives you, unless you're like a social media expert or you're someone who gets paid for social media, then what are the benefits of hours on social media? What are the benefits? What are they? What are the long-term benefits of social media? None. I mean, marginal at best. Where building a relationship or going out and finding and substantiating a real relationship with someone. Go to a networking event. Make real solid connections with someone and then see where that relationship takes you over the long term. Could be business opportunities, could be financial gains, could be a great relationship that even ends poorly, but you still learned something from it. You still gained something out of that. Where playing a video game gains you what? Going on social media for hours on end gains you what? That's the whole premise. Right? Building something for the long term is positive pleasure. Doing something, putting in effort to build something great in the long term is positive pleasure. It might not feel like positive in the beginning, but over the course of time, the dividends. You ask most parents, I'm not going to say all, because we all know there's low-life parents out there who could care less about their children. But people who've invested in building a family, you ask any of them, the rewards to being a parent is 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times the effort it took to raise that child. Yes, there's dark times in being a parent. Yes, there's dark times in being in a relationship. But the benefits always, in the long term, outweigh the negatives. That's what it's about. So think about that. Negative pleasure, the instant gratification. I urge you to limit those things. Limit your social media intake. Limit your porn intake. For men, porn and masturbation. Limit overconsumption of anything. And start putting in time towards things that build the long term, build the positive pleasure for the long term. Real relationships, real careers, Things that you want for yourself and your family. Like a side hustle that ends up being your full-time gig. That ends up being the life-changing thing for you and your family. Instead of getting home from work, turning on mindless TV or logging on and watching a bunch of YouTube videos or whatever it is, just for mindless entertainment. Do something that creates something for the future, giving you positive pleasure. Instead of doing things that give you negative pleasure, that reward you nothing in the long term and only in the here and now. All those things that you want and desire for yourself, they're all in things that take time, that require you to put in time, effort, sometimes sweat equity in order for you to achieve and to get. Those are worthwhile endeavors. That's what I'm urging you to do, to focus on. With that being said, I'm David Bay with Project Breakthroughs, and I look forward to catching you in the next episode. Take care.